is a bear?
I've had this sitting here about 10 minutes now, just looking at it, which is a strange thing to admit. A grown bear staring at a glass of water like it's got something to say to him. Somebody sent me a number last week. No context, just a number the way everything arrives now. And I have not been able to put it down since. It's been sitting right here next to this glass all week, whether the glass was actually here or not. I'm not going to tell you the number yet. I want you to sit with it the way I've been sitting with it. Because it isn't really about the water. That's just where the question started. And once they started, I couldn't get them to stop. So tonight's a little different. Less whiskey talk, more plumbing. Wiring, the stuff behind the wall. I want to find out what's actually back there, behind the thing I talk to every single day. And I mean that about as literally as a bear can mean it. Okay, here's the number. A single question to one of these AI chatbots. 1. Supposedly drinks a whole bottle of water. That's the claim. I've seen it 100 times this year. Somebody posts it, everybody shares it, everybody feels a little guilty. Nobody checks it. And I'm not going to tell you whether that's true tonight. That's not a cop-out, I promise. I've got a guy for that. But I want to tell you why the question underneath it grabbed me so hard I built an entire episode around it. Because here's the strange part. I use this thing every day. You probably do too. I ask it things. It answers back, sounds like a person, sometimes sounds smarter than a person, and I have never once, not one time, asked myself where it actually lives. Not where, like a website address. I mean where. Physically on the ground. Is it a building? Is it a guy in a server closet somewhere? Is it just a cloud floating up there? Weightless, eating nothing, costing nothing, made of nothing. Because that's sort of how we treat it in our heads. Like it's not really a thing. It's just intelligence. Hovering, you type, it thinks, answer comes back. No plumbing, no wiring, no bill. And that's the strange thing I want to start with tonight. We built something that talks back, something that writes and reasons, and can hold up its end of a conversation better than half the people I know. And almost nobody who uses it every day could tell you what it's actually made of. Not the code. I don't mean the code, I mean the physical thing. The building, the water going in one side, the power going in the other. The actual dirt it's sitting on, we skipped straight past all of that and went right to ask it anything. And look, everybody agrees on the headline. Everybody, doesn't matter who you ask, doesn't matter what side of anything they're on. AI is the future. It's happening. It's going to change everything. It's already changing everything. Get on board or get left behind. You've heard that sentence in about 9 different voices this year alone. Here's what nobody says in that same breath, though nobody says. And by the way, that future is drinking rivers to keep cool. Nobody says that future is quietly deciding whether your grandkids inherit a nuclear power plant or a natural gas one. Nobody says a single word about the actual physical, unglamorous machinery underneath the miracle. Everyone agrees it's the future. Nobody talks about what the future is actually plugged into. I'll tell you where this really started for me, and it's a dumb little thing. I flipped a light switch every day of my life, every single day. Never once, not as a cub, not now, did I stop and think about where that power actually comes from before it gets to my paw. It's just there, you flip it, the light comes on, and somewhere between the flipping and the coming on, there's a whole invisible country of wires and turbines and men in hard hats that I have never once had to think about. That's sort of the whole deal of modern life. If you think about it, somebody built you a world where you never have to see the machine. And that used to be fine by me, genuinely. I don't need to understand a combustion engine to drive my truck. I don't need to understand the postal system to get a letter. Some things you're allowed to just use. But every big leap we've ever made as a species, there was a moment where the invisible part stopped being small enough to ignore. Steam power ran on coal, and eventually the coal was the whole story. The smoke, the miners, the black lungs, all of it caught up with a miracle. Electricity ran on dams and coal plants, and eventually you couldn't talk about electricity without talking about where the electricity came from. The internet runs on cables under the ocean floor that nobody thinks about until one of them snaps and half a country loses signal. Every leap there's a grace period where the miracle gets to just be a miracle and the plumbing stays backstage. And then at some point, always, the plumbing gets too big to stay backstage. It walks right out into the middle of the show. I think that's where we are with this. Right now tonight, I think the plumbing just walked out on stage, and most of us are still watching the miracle and haven't noticed it standing there. Let me tell you about the first real job I ever had. I was maybe 17. Worked one summer for a fella named Rick. General contractor, ran a small outfit out past the edge of town. Not glamorous work, I hauled lumber. I held the tape measure. I fetched tools with names I didn't know yet. And there was this one site real early before the slab was even poured. Just a big rectangle of dirt and a crew down in it laying pipe. Water line here, sewer line there, electrical conduit running off to a corner. And Rick stopped the truck and just stared at the trench for a second before we got out. And I asked him what he was looking at. And he said every single thing that's ever going to happen inside that building. Every faucet, every outlet, every light switch. Somebody flips without thinking. All of it's getting decided right now in a ditch before there's a single wall standing. And he wasn't bitter about it. That's the part I remember most. He said it like it was the whole point, like his entire job, his whole reason for getting up before the sun was to get every one of those decisions right while it was still just dirt and pipe. Because once the slab goes down, nobody ever thinks about the trench again. The better he did his job, the more invisible it got. Success for Rick. Looked exactly like nobody ever having a reason to dig that trench back up. I think about Rick a lot now because I think whoever's laying the water lines and running the power into these AI campuses is doing the exact same job he did, making something enormous and visible before the first person ever walks through the door. And they're good enough at it that most of us never once think to ask what's actually sitting in that trench. Except this trench is a little bigger than Rick's job site. And I started wondering if maybe that's exactly the problem. Not that anybody's hiding anything, just that the job got so big and so quiet that we stopped even remembering there was a trench to ask about. And here's the thing that actually got me digging once I started pulling on this thread. This isn't the first time we've done this, not even close. Every single leap we've made, there's a name for the invisible thing underneath it. And we always find out its name later than we should have. Steam power. Everybody remembers the trains, the factories, the miracle of it. Almost nobody remembers that the coal running it came out of the ground on the backs of actual children for decades before anybody with power decided that was a bridge too far. The miracle got the headlines. The mine got discovered later by people who had to go looking for it on purpose. Same play, electricity. We talk about Edison and the light bulb like it's a magic trick. Nobody puts "and it required damming half a dozen rivers and burning mountains of coal" in the same sentence as "let there be light." The miracle got the story. The dam got a plaque nobody reads. The internet. Same play again, and this one's inside my own lifetime. We talk about it like it's weightless. Information, floating, free, everywhere at once. And the whole thing runs through actual physical cables lying on the actual floor of the actual ocean. You can look at a map of them right now. There's a spot off the coast of Egypt where something like a dozen of the world's major cables all bottleneck through one narrow stretch of seabed. And every few years, a boat drags an anchor through the wrong patch of water and a whole continent's internet gets slow for a day. And everybody just shrugs and calls it a glitch. A glitch. Not we built the nervous system of the modern world through a bottleneck, the width of a shipping lane, and never told anybody. A glitch. So that's the pattern. 3 times over now. The miracle arrives loud. The plumbing arrives quiet and late, and usually only after something's already gone wrong once. And I don't want to be the guy finding out about the cable on the ocean floor the day it snaps. I'd rather go look at the map now while everything's still working. So I started making a list, and once I started, I couldn't stop because every answer I found led straight into another question I didn't know I had. It starts with the water. That's the bottle of water number I opened with. Fine, but then if it's using water to cool itself down, where's that water going? Doesn't it just evaporate? Can't you catch it? Can't you use it again? Feels like the kind of thing an engineer should have solved by now. And then I thought about the heat, because cooling something down means you're pulling heat out of it, right? That's just what cooling is. So where does all that heat go? It's got to go somewhere. And if you've got a whole building full of machines constantly making that heat, isn't that just a power plant running in reverse? Couldn't you catch some of that back? Run it through a turbine? Get a little power back out of the deal? Feels like free money sitting on the table, which usually means I'm missing something. That's usually how it goes with free money. And then the water and the heat both start pointing at the same bigger question, which is power, just raw electricity. How much of it does this stuff actually eat? Because I keep hearing numbers that sound made up. Gigawatts. I don't have a gigawatt in my house. I don't think I've ever had an honest conversation about what a gigawatt even is. And if it's eating that much power, where's that power coming from? Is it clean? Is it coal? Did somebody just quietly turn a switch back on at an old power plant I thought was closed for good? Because I've heard that too. And if that's true, that seems like the kind of thing that should be on the news every night, not something I stumble into at 1 in the morning down a research hole. And this is where it stopped being a normal Tuesday night curiosity and started being something I couldn't let go of. I found out people are talking seriously with real money behind it about putting these things in space, data centers, in orbit. And my first thought was, that's insane. That's science fiction. Somebody's pitching investors a movie plot, and then I found out it's not a pitch. It's happening. There's a company worth over $1 billion building toward exactly this right now this year. And I want to be fair to myself here because my next thought wasn't why, it was how do you even get the parts up there? You can't exactly ship a server rack UPS ground to low orbit. Every pound you launch costs real money, serious money, and these things are heavy. So whatever the answer is, it has to be a good one because the cost of just getting there is already enormous before you booted up a single chip. And obviously the first thing I thought was, well, at least it's cold up there. Free cooling space is cold. Everybody knows space is cold. Problem solved. Just put the whole mess somewhere. The cold does the work for you. Except apparently that's exactly backwards. That part I'm saving for him. But hold on to it. Because when my guest gets to it tonight, it might be the single best everybody gets this wrong, including me moment we've ever had on this show. And then, because apparently I wasn't going to sleep this week no matter what, I started thinking about quantum computing, which I don't understand even a little bit, and I want to just be honest about that right now. I hear the word, I nod like I know what it means, and I do not know what it means. People have been promising me quantum computers for 20 years. 20. It's the flying car of computers at this point. So where's it actually at? Is it close? Is it going to change how these AI systems even get built? Blow the whole thing up and start over? Or is it one of those things that's permanently 5 years away forever on purpose? And then my brain took a hard left out of the hardware and into the actual thinking machine itself. Because I keep hearing this word tokens. Everybody says it like I'm supposed to already know. Tokens this, cost per token that. Nobody's ever once stopped and just told me, plainly, what a token actually is. And I started wondering if maybe I shouldn't be renting somebody else's giant AI at all. What if I just built my own small, trained only on my stuff, my business, my documents, feels like it'd be smarter, more focused, mine, or is that actually a terrible idea and there's some reason everybody doesn't just do that? And what even is the best one out of all of them? Everybody online's got a favorite, everybody's got a strong opinion, everybody's absolutely certain, and everybody disagrees with each other. Is there actually a best model, or is that a fake question like asking somebody what the best tool in the garage is? And here's the one that actually stopped me cold. The one I could not let go of. There's an AI right now that is, by a real margin, the best in the world at writing computer code. Genuinely brilliant, solves problems that would take a team of people a week in about a minute. And that same AI cannot draw you a picture. Can't do it. Not does it badly. Can't do it at all. Full stop. That's not what it does. And I kept turning that over and it just didn't sit right with me. Because it's not like drawing a picture of some higher, harder form of genius than writing flawless code. If anything, I'd have called it the easier trick. And here's this thing, smart enough to outcode nearly every programmer alive, and it just can't. Seems like if it's that smart, it should be able to figure out how to draw, doesn't it? That question wouldn't leave me alone, out of everything on this list. That's the one that actually got under my skin the way the priest did a few episodes back. Not because it's the biggest question, because it's the one that made me realize I don't understand what these things actually are. Not even a little. I use one every day and I couldn't tell you what it is. And I'll tell you what actually scared me a little working through all of this. It wasn't any single answer. It was how many of my own guesses turned out to just be wrong. Confidently wrong. I'd have bet you real money that space was free cooling. I'd have told you, no hesitation, that recycling cooling water was obviously already solved because why wouldn't it be? And I wasn't being lazy. I just had never been asked to actually think it through. Nobody had. That's the part that got me. Not that I didn't know the answers, that I didn't know I had questions. And I think that's true for most of us, with most of the big things running underneath our lives right now. We're not ignorant on purpose, we just never got handed the invitation to look. So tonight's the invitation. That's really all this is. So that's the list. Water, heat, power, space, quantum tokens, why? The smartest thing on earth can't draw a picture of a dog, and every question on it led straight into the next one. And none of them are the kind of thing I can just go look up and trust the first answer I find. So I went and found somebody who's actually spent his career doing this. Not talking about it, doing it, moving water and power around for a living, for 20 years at the kind of scale that makes my head hurt just hearing the numbers. And then he moved into building the actual machines running these AI systems. And I asked him to just sit down with me and explain the whole thing, all of it. Where it eats, where it sweats, what it's actually made of under the hood before a single word of an answer ever gets typed back to you. Because I think there's something bigger in here than water bills and power grids. I think if you follow this list all the way to the end, it stops being an engineering question, but we're going to earn that. We're going to do this one the right way. Plumbing first. So, let's find out what's actually on the other end of the line. My guest tonight spent 20 years moving water and power around buildings. Most of us will never set foot in data center thermal engineering. That's cooling at a scale that would make your head spin. Then a few years back, he moved sideways into the machines themselves, built the systems that keep AI running. So when I say this is the right guy for tonight, I mean he's lived on both sides of every question on my list. I'll be honest, when I found out what he actually does for a living, my first thought was, that's not a job I've ever heard a kid say he wants to grow up and do. Nobody dreams about cooling systems. And then I talked to him for 10 minutes and understood exactly why he's the one sitting in that chair tonight.
Sorry. 1 second. This hinge has been driving me crazy since I walked in. Never mind, found it.
Watts, the door's fine. It's been fine for 4 episodes.
It's got about a millimeter of play in the top hinge. I can hear it. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. That's just how ears work.
Sit down, Watts.
In a second, your table's got a short leg, did you know that? Back left. I'm not gonna fix it right now, I'm just gonna say it out loud so it's on the record.
Sit down.
Sitting. I'm sitting.
No whiskey for you tonight either, huh?
Coffee, black. I've had this exact thermos for 11 years. I've replaced everything on it twice. But I've never once finished a full cup of anything in my life. Always something else that needs doing halfway through.
20 years cooling buildings the size of small towns. What made you jump into the AI side of it?
Same job, bigger numbers, faster clock. Everything I spent 2 decades learning about moving heat and water around at scale. All of it suddenly mattered 10 times more because the density of these AI racks blew past anything I'd built for. I didn't change careers, Bear. The problem just got a lot more interesting and showed up on my doorstep.
All right, straight to it then. Before you find something else in this room that needs fixing, that number I opened with tonight, the bottle of water, is that real?
Depends entirely on which water you're counting, Bear, and that's the honest answer. And it's also exactly what most of those posts leave out. My rule on air, always, the number, the unit, and who's counting. Leave any one of those 3 out and what you've got is marketing, not a fact.
Okay, give me all 3 then.
Direct water. What actually evaporates on site, cooling the building itself, for one text query. That's under a milliliter. Some of the more efficient sites are down around 1/4 of a milliliter. Sam Altman himself put a single ChatGPT query at about 3/10 of a milliliter of direct water. Mid-2A 25.
That's nothing. That's basically a drop.
Basically a drop, correct. But there's a second number, and it's the one people are actually thinking of when they say a bottle, 10 to 25 milliliters per conversation. That comes from a 2023 study out of UC Riverside, and it's not on-site water at all, it's the full accounting. It adds in the water the power plant used to generate the electricity that ran your query in the first place.
So neither number's lying.
Neither one's lying. They're answering 2 different questions, and nobody says which one they mean. Direct water's small. Indirect water, the power plant's water, that's where the real number's hiding. And even the high end of that, 25 milliliters, still isn't a whole bottle. A bottle's 500. Whoever started that meme was talking about a training run, or a full day of use, and let it get smashed down into one query, and it stuck, because it's a better story than the real one.
Okay, so one question's a few drops. Then how does Google end up using 11 billion gallons a year? I saw that number and about fell out of my chair.
Multiply a small number by a very large denominator, Bear. Google's 2025 consumption, 10.9 billion gallons. Up 34% year over year. More than double what they used in 2021. Amazon's smaller footprint, 2.5 billion gallons globally, and that one's actually down 2% even as the company grew, which is the efficiency side of this story working.
Down 2% while everything else is going up. How?
Better engineering mostly, which we'll get to. But the mechanism at most sites still is evaporative cooling towers. Water absorbs the heat and leaves as vapor. It's not contaminated, it's just gone. Gone from that watershed specifically, which is why folks in drought country feel it even though, chemically, nothing got used up. Rule of thumb, an evaporative tower burns about 2.6 million gallons per megawatt per year.
Okay, you're an engineer. Can't you just recycle the water instead of evaporating it away? Feels like the obvious fix.
Yes.
And we're already doing it. Closed loop, liquid to chip, the water or coolant just circulates the same loop indefinitely instead of leaving as vapor. Near zero ongoing consumption once it's built. NVIDIA's got a design out this year, the DSX platform, pushes on-site water demand to almost nothing in a temperate climate. There's a real metric for this too. Water usage effectiveness, gallons per kilowatt hour, same idea as the power metric but for water. This year, Amazon's at 0.023, best in class. Microsoft said 0.046. Meta's estimated around 0.120. That spread tells you something. This isn't fixed by the hardware. It varies operator to operator, based on how much anyone actually cares to engineer it out.
So solved, closed loop problems handled.
Mostly handled. Here's the asterisk, and it's an honest one. Closed loop stops the water use at the building wall. It does nothing for the water the power plant burns to make the electricity running that loop in the first place. And that's the majority of this whole footprint. We'll get there when we talk about the grid. Hang on to that one. Hold on. Is that condensation pooling under your glass? You don't have a coaster under there. Give me 1 second.
Watts. It's a glass of water on a wooden table. It'll survive.
It's not about survival. It's about rings. Wood remembers everything you don't wipe up. Found one. There.
There, coaster. Can we get back to the part where I've been carrying 11 billion gallons of guilt around for nothing?
Almost. One more piece, and it's the one that actually surprised me most when I got into this industry. All of that, the query, the cooling, the tower, that's not even where the water story starts.
What do you mean, starts? I thought we were at the start.
Before any of this runs, before a single query, before the building even opens, somebody had to make the chip. And chip fabrication is one of the most water-intensive processes on the planet. A single silicon wafer at TSMC takes about 59.3 liters of ultra-pure water per layer, and a modern chip's got dozens of layers. One fab running full tilt draws water like a city of 58,000 people. TSMC's total water draw in 2023, 101 billion liters.
So the water bill starts before the building's even built.
Before the building's even built. Everybody's arguing about query cost, and the chip in front of them already cost more water than they'll ever spend asking it questions.
Okay, if the cooling's a problem in the first place, the actual heat you're pulling out of these buildings, why not turn that into something? Run it through a turbine, get some power back out of the deal. Feels like free money.
Your instinct's dead right, Bear, and the physics says no, and the why is actually the fun part. Let's ground it first. You know mechanically what cooling even is.
Pull heat out, move it somewhere else. That's about as far as I've thought it through.
That's exactly it. Chips generate heat as a byproduct. Billions of transistors switching, every switch throws off a little warmth, multiply that by a whole rack, and you've got a real problem in about 4 seconds if nothing moves it. 3 ways we do it in 2026. Air, fans, and heat sinks. Oldest method, worst at these densities. Liquid to chip, coolant plates sitting right on the silicon, and immersion whole servers dunked in a fluid that doesn't conduct electricity at all.
You dunk the whole computer in liquid.
Whole thing. Engineered dielectric fluid, won't short anything out, pulls heat off way better than air ever could. There's a metric for how well a whole facility's doing this. PUE, power usage effectiveness. Total power divided by the power actually reaching the chips. Best sites this year are pushing toward 1.1 or lower. Older facilities were running 1.5, sometimes 2.
Okay, so you pulled all that heat out. Where's it go?
Here's the number that answers your turbine question. Data center waste heat runs below about 70 degrees Celsius. Compare that to a coal or gas plant, which is running its turbines at 500 degrees plus. Turning heat into electricity is capped by something called the Carnot limit, and Carnot efficiency collapses as your heat source gets closer to room temperature. At 70 degrees, there's barely a temperature difference left to extract any work from it all.
Give me an actual number. Not barely?
Real example, a 300 kilowatt organic Rankine cycle unit, the standard tech for squeezing power out of low-grade waste heat, measured 9.4% gross efficiency running off a 121-degree source. That's only 40% of its own theoretical Carnot ideal. At data center temperatures, you're at 7% or less. Think of it like this log right up on the fire. It's hot enough to actually do something with. Same log, 3 feet back. Still warm, sure, but you're not running anything off it. Data center heats the log 3 feet back. That's the whole, sorry, hang on?
Watts, your coffee's about to go on the mantle.
Caught it, anyway, 7%. You'd spend more building the turbine than you'd ever recover running it. The heat's completely real. It's just too cold to be power. Doesn't mean it's too cold to be useful, though.
Okay, so it's too cold for a turbine. Is it just wasted, or is there something smarter going on?
Smarter. Use it as heat, not power. Skip the conversion step entirely. Stockholm's doing this right now. So is Dublin. Data center waste heat gets piped straight into the neighborhood district heating loop. No Carnot penalty, because you never tried to turn it into electricity in the first place. You just moved warm water from one building into 1,000 radiators.
So somebody's actually heating their house off a server farm.
Right now, tonight, somewhere in Stockholm. There's a second trick too: car node batteries. A heat pump takes that low-grade waste heat and upgrades it to something hotter during off-peak hours, stores it, and an ORC discharges it as power later during peak demand. One demonstrated system hit 7.16% ORC efficiency and cut the data center's own cooling bill by 30% at the same time. Worse raw conversion than a real power plant, but you're squeezing value out of heat that was otherwise pure waste, twice over.
Twice over.
Power out one side, lower cooling bill on the other, and there's an early-stage trick out of Rice University. Cheap flat-plate solar collectors pre-warm the coolant before it ever reaches the ORC, just enough to push it over that temperature threshold where conversion actually starts paying off. Not deployed at hyperscale yet, but it's a real answer to your why not both instinct, Bear. It's just heat, not turbine.
All right. So we've got the water and we've got the heat that all runs on power in the first place. How much power are we actually talking about all in?
Give you the real number, then. U.S. data center power demand: 31 gigawatts in 2025, 41 gigawatts in 2026. That's roughly a third more in 1 year.
1 year.
1 year. Put it against the whole grid and it's 4.1% of U.S. peak summer demand in 2025, climbing to 5.3% in 2026. Globally, data center electricity use grew 17% last year. The AI-specific slice of that grew 50%. And the U.S. is carrying the biggest share of anybody. We hold about 45% of global AI data center capacity, measured by power draw. This is disproportionately an American grid story, Bear.
Where's that going by the end of the decade?
IEA's projection: 415 terawatt-hours globally in 2024, climbing to roughly 945 by 2030. More than doubling in 6 years. Our own Department of Energy had data centers at 4.4% of total U.S. electricity back in 2023. Their range for 2028 is 6.7 to 12%.
That's a wide range. 6.7 to 12. That's not a rounding error. That's almost double.
It's genuine uncertainty, not sloppy math. Depends entirely on how fast compute demand keeps climbing versus how fast the efficiency gains catch up. Anybody who hands you one precise number for 2028 right now is selling you something.
Okay, so when one of these gigawatt campuses actually comes online, what's turning on to feed it? Is it clean?
Mixed and getting more urgent every quarter. Honest answer for most new capacity right now: natural gas turbines. They build faster than nuclear, faster than utility-scale renewables, and grid operators need the power now, not in 2032. Solar and wind are getting contracted aggressively too, but intermittency means they're usually paired with gas as backup, not a full replacement. That's part of why the mix hasn't shifted as fast as the renewable press releases make it sound.
Hang on, gas turbines. Those need water too, don't they? To cool the plant itself?
There it is. Every thermal power plant, gas, coal, even nuclear, uses water to cool itself. So even a clean nuclear-powered data center is still drinking through its power source. Remember that 54% I mentioned back in the thirst block, the water footprint that closed-loop data center cooling never touches? That's mostly this. It's the power plant's water, not the building's.
So the water story never actually left. It just moved upstream.
Moved upstream is exactly right. You can close every loop in the building and you still haven't touched most of the actual footprint.
You said renewables getting contracted aggressively, so there's actual solar and wind behind some of this too, not just gas.
On paper, plenty. Company signs what's called a power purchase agreement, a contract to buy the output of a specific solar farm or wind project, sometimes one that isn't even built yet. That's how a lot of these companies get to claim clean energy, even when the actual electrons hitting their building, physically, off the local grid, are the same mixed bag as everybody else's.
So the clean claim and the actual wire in the wall aren't necessarily the same thing.
Not necessarily.
And there's a real argument happening right now in the industry about whether a given contract actually brought new clean power onto the grid or just bought up capacity that would have existed anyway. I'm not going to adjudicate that one for you tonight. I'll just tell you it's live, and it's not settled, and anybody who tells you it's simple is skipping a step.
I keep hearing nuclear for AI thrown around like a slogan. Is that real? Or is that just a press release with good font choices?
Real contracts, real construction, longer timelines than the headlines let on. Microsoft's putting $16 billion into a 20-year deal to restart 3 Mile Island's Unit 1, 835 megawatts. Federal regulators cleared the last major hurdle June 1st of this year. They're targeting back online, second half of 2027.
That's the fastest one because it's a restart, not building new.
Exactly the distinction that matters. Amazon's put over $700 million into a company called X-Energy for small modular reactors, plus expanded a power deal with Talon Energy up to 1,920 megawatts. Google's committed 500 megawatts to a small modular design from Kairos Power, but that one's not landing until sometime between 2030 and 2035. Meta's the biggest number on paper, up to 6.6 gigawatts across 4 different partners, and also the longest timeline, 2032 to 2035.
So the restart's real and close. Everything else is a bet on the 2030s.
That's the honest read. Small modular doesn't mean fast. It helps you manufacture and license reactors more repeatably. It doesn't change the physics or the years of construction underneath. Building anything nuclear, even modular, still takes most of a decade.
Hold on, 3 Mile Island. Isn't that the plant that actually melted down? Why is Microsoft restarting the one that blew up?
Fair question, and it's exactly the mix-up most people carry around. 3 Mile Island had 2 separate reactors. Unit 2 partially melted down, March 28, 1979, about half the core, genuinely serious, that's the accident everybody's heard of. Unit 1 is a completely different reactor, on the same site, that was undamaged. It kept running safely for decades afterward, one of the best performing plants in the whole country, right up until it got shut down in 2019, for economics, cheap natural gas undercutting it, not safety.
So Microsoft's restarting the reactor that never had the accident.
Correct. Unit 2 never ran again. The last of its waste didn't even leave the site until the 1990s. Unit 1 is the one coming back online. Different machines, same address, and that address does a lot of heavy lifting in headlines that don't make the distinction.
Okay, give me the honest money question then. These things ever actually come in on budget?
Almost never, and I'll give you the number instead of dancing around it. Plant Vogel, Georgia, 2 new reactors, broke ground 2009. Supposed to finish 2017 at about $14 billion. Actually finished 2023 and 2024. 7 years late. Final cost, 37 billion. A global study of nuclear projects found 97% finish over their original budget, average overrun north of $1 billion each.
97%. That's not an exception. That's just what building one of these costs.
That's the honest baseline, yes. Anyone quoting you a clean number and a clean date on a brand new reactor is quoting you the optimistic case, not the historical one.
One more, because it's been bugging me what actually happens to the nuclear waste. That doesn't go away either, does it?
It doesn't, and this is the part almost nobody follows to the end. As of this year, there's over 95,000 metric tons of spent fuel sitting at nearly 80 sites across more than 30 states. Cooled in a pool on site for a decade or so, then sealed into steel and concrete dry casks and stored right there at the plant, indefinitely. There's no permanent national storage site actually built yet. It just sits at the reactor, cask after cask, waiting on a political decision that hasn't landed in decades.
So it's not a solved problem, it's a parked one.
Parked is exactly the word. Well-engineered, genuinely safe sitting where it is, but parked, not resolved. Nobody's finished that sentence yet.
Straight question, since we're already here, if they build one of these near me, am I actually in any danger?
Genuinely, no, not from normal operation. These are some of the most heavily inspected, redundantly safeguarded buildings on the planet. And that's not industry talking. That's just the regulatory reality after 1979 rewrote every rulebook in this business. The actual risk profile people carry around in their heads is still calibrated to Chernobyl and to Unit 2, not to what a modern plant, or a restarted, well-inspected Unit 1, actually looks like day to day.
So the fear's outdated. The caution about cost and timeline isn't.
That's exactly the split I'd want you to walk away with. Be skeptical of the calendar and the budget. Don't transfer that skepticism onto the safety case. Those are 2 completely different arguments, and most conversations about this collapse them into one.
Here's one that'll sound made up, but go ahead and surprise me.
You live near a coal plant. You're actually getting more radiation exposure than somebody living near a nuclear one. Coal ash carries trace uranium and thorium, and a landmark study measured people near coal plants, absorbing something like 3 to 6 times the radiation dose of people near a well-regulated nuclear plant.
Wait, seriously? The clean one is the radioactive one?
The one everybody's scared of is the one that's regulated down to almost nothing. The one nobody thinks twice about is quietly putting more of it into the air, unregulated, as a byproduct of just burning rock. I'm not saying coal's some hidden villain either. The actual numbers involved are small either way. Background radiation small. I'm saying our fear and the actual risk have never been on speaking terms. Sorry, that poker's leaning against the stone at an angle that's gonna have it on the floor in about 10 minutes. Small thing. Won't take a second.
You really can't leave anything alone, can you?
Not really, no. Never could. Where were we?
Alright, so while we're all waiting around on nuclear power to sweat rivers into steam, and gas turbines to fill the gap in the meantime, what if we just skip the planet entirely? What's this whole thing about putting data centers in space? Is that actually real?
Real. And funded. And further along than most people realize. This sounds insane on its face, I know, a server rack in orbit. But stay with me.
Why would anyone put a server rack in orbit? Genuinely convince me.
Solar power and real estate mostly, and it's not a thought experiment anymore. There's a company, StarCloud, $1.1 billion valuation on a $170 million funding round. They filed in February this year for an 88,000 satellite constellation, and just to be specific, this isn't a comms constellation. The payload is compute. GPUs and TPUs doing actual inference and training in orbit.
That's not Starlink relaying a signal. That's the computer itself up there.
Correct. Their next satellite carries NVIDIA H100's Blackwell platform hardware and the first AWS Outposts gear ever flown, targeting October this year. Long-term vision is a 5-gigawatt orbital hypercluster fed by a 4-square-kilometer solar array. Google's got their own version, Project Suncatcher, TPUs in orbit, 2 prototype satellites launching by early 2027.
Okay, but why? What's the actual advantage of doing this a few hundred miles up instead of just building another building in Texas?
This is the whole economic case in one sentence, and it's not what people guess. Most people reach for latency, faster connections, that sort of thing. It's not that, it's the sun. In orbit, a solar panel sees full-intensity sunlight roughly 24 hours a day. No atmosphere in the way, no weather, no night, if you pick the right orbit. A ground panel's sitting at maybe 20 to 25% capacity factor. Up there, you're closer to constant.
Huh? I'd have guessed latency too, honestly.
Everybody does. It's the intuitive answer. It's just not the one StarCloud's actually building toward. Their own numbers are about power, full stop.
Alright, everybody thinks space is cold, so cooling should be free up there, right? No air conditioning bill, just open a window.
Backwards. Completely backwards. And this might be the best everybody gets this wrong moment I've got for you all night. Space isn't cold, Bear. Space is empty.
Say that again?
Space isn't cold. Space is empty. Cold's a property of matter, molecules moving slowly. Vacuum doesn't have molecules to be cold. On Earth, heat leaves your electronics mostly by convection, air or liquid physically carrying it away. In a vacuum, convection doesn't exist. There's nothing there to carry anything.
So how does the heat leave it all?
One way, radiation. Infrared photons, straight out, governed by the Stefan Boltzmann law, energy radiated scales with temperature to the 4th power. That 4th power relationship is the whole story. Small temperature increases pay off enormously, but it also means a nice cool radiator, which is what you'd want to protect nearby hardware, is a weak radiator. Real panels reject something like 166 watts per square meter, once you account for structure and plumbing losses.
So you need a lot of surface area to get rid of any real amount of heat.
A lot. The engineering answer is you dedicate a shadow-facing surface, pointed away from the sun, staring into deep space instead, which sits at around 4 degrees above absolute zero, rather than catching 1300 plus watts per square meter of direct sunlight. Coat it for high infrared emittance, low solar absorption. That's your radiator.
Wait, all that heat radiating out into space, does any of that come back around and warm the planet up? Is this just moving our global warming problem to a different address?
Opposite, actually. And it's a fair thing to worry about. Heat radiated off a shadow-facing panel goes outward, into deep space, away from Earth. It never re-enters our atmosphere. It never touches our climate system at all. In terms of Earth's own temperature, that heat might as well not exist.
So building it in orbit is actually the cleaner option. Heat-wise,
For that one specific piece. Yes. Now ground-based data centers, that's a different, smaller conversation than people expect. Their waste heat is real, it's measurable. Right at the site it can run several times hotter than peak sunlight hitting the same patch of ground. Researchers are actually starting to study it as a legitimate urban heat hazard, a real local effect on the neighborhood around a big campus.
but that's not the same thing as global warming.
Different mechanism entirely, and worth keeping straight. Global warming's driven by greenhouse gases trapping heat that would have otherwise escaped to space. That's the dominant effect, not close. Waste heat is just more heat, added directly on top of that. Right now, all the data centers on Earth combined are a real but modest slice of that picture, a few percent of a regional heat budget, not a driver of the global one. Worth watching as this keeps scaling, not the main event.
So if you need that much surface area just to dump heat, doesn't that eat the whole advantage of being up there in the first place?
Now you're asking the question nobody's fully answered in public. Because heat rejection scales with area times temperature to the fourth power, and chips can't run arbitrarily hot without damage, the radiator farm you'd need to dump gigawatts of waste heat is genuinely comparable in size to the solar array itself. That 5 gigawatt hypercluster, 4 square kilometer array, there's a matching radiator footprint baked into that math, even when the press release doesn't spell it out.
That sounds like you're telling me this doesn't actually work.
I'm telling you, it's provably possible in physics. Whether it's economical at gigawatt scale versus just building a better facility on the ground, that's genuinely unresolved. Nobody's published a real radiator spec next to their solar numbers yet. That's an honest gap, and I'd rather tell you it's a gap than pretend I know the answer.
Give me the skeptic's version. Then, straight up, what could stop this from ever actually working?
3 real bottlenecks, none of them science fiction. Radiation. No atmosphere means no shielding from cosmic rays, and the same particle strikes that cause the occasional glitch in a terrestrial chip happen far more often up there. Hardware needs real shielding or heavy redundancy. Repair. A failed drive down here gets swapped in 5 minutes. A failed component in orbit might be unreachable for the rest of that satellite's life. Changes the whole reliability calculus.
And the third.
Launch cost and cadence. Even at today's reusable rocket prices, lofting gigawatts of hardware plus kilometers of solar and radiator structure is an enormous number of launches. The 5 gigawatt vision is explicitly a later decade target, not this year's actual payload. What's flying in October, and what's Suncatcher's flying in early 2027, those are proof of concept satellites. Can we keep chips alive and useful up there at all, not replace every ground data center? Different phase entirely.
There's a fourth one, and it's not about the hardware at all. Are we going to fill our own sky with so much of this stuff that nobody can actually see the stars anymore?
That one's not hypothetical, and it's bigger than most people realize. As of this year, there's already something over 10,000 Starlink satellites alone in orbit, and that's one company's internet constellation. Before you add a single compute satellite to the sky. StarCloud's own filing was for 88,000. And this January, SpaceX filed with federal regulators for an orbital data center system of its own up to 1 million satellites.
A million, on top of the 10,000 already up there.
On top of everything already flying. Astronomers raised the alarm on this years ago. One estimate back in 2021 figured that at just 65,000 satellites, something like 1 in every 15 points of light you'd see in the night sky would actually be a moving satellite, not a star. That was before any of these newest filings existed.
So the night sky itself is genuinely part of this cost, not the water, not the power. The actual view.
Genuinely part of it. Long exposure telescope images get streaked by satellite trails. Indigenous communities that have read that sky the same way for thousands of years are watching it fill up with moving lights that were never supposed to be there. Nobody's voted on this. It's happening one FCC filing at a time. And most folks won't notice until they step outside on a clear night a few years from now, and the sky just looks different.
That one actually sits worse with me than the water numbers did.
It should. The water, at least. Somebody's job is to measure. Nobody's job is the sky.
Is there anybody actually fighting this? Or is it just going to happen because nobody with the power to stop it has a reason to?
There's real pushback. Astronomers have been raising it for years. There are formal proposals for darker satellite coatings, quieter orbits, agreements to route around the most sensitive observatories. Some of it's actually worked. Newer satellites are dimmer than the first generation. But it's a request, not a law. in most of the world. Nobody's obligated to build it dim. They're obligated to build it. Period. Once the paperwork clears.
So it comes down to whether the company filing the paperwork decides to care.
Comes down to exactly that. Same as the water, same as the power. The engineering to do it more gently already exists. Whether it gets used is a choice made by somebody who will never personally have to walk outside and notice the sky looks different.
Okay, I need a second to shift gears here because we've spent this whole hour on the building. I want to know what's actually inside it. What is this thing actually the brain part, not the plumbing?
Fair. Everybody says tokens like it's obvious. What is it actually?
That's what I'm asking you.
Right? Not a word and not a letter. A chunk in between. The model's vocabulary is built out of common chunks of characters. Understanding might be one whole token, or it might split into under, stand, ing, depends how common each piece showed up in the training data. Rule of thumb, one token's about 4 English characters. Roughly 3/4 of a word.
So everything it writes back to me is built out of these little Lego pieces.
Exactly that. And here's the part that actually matters. Reading your question, thinking about it, writing the answer. All of it happens one token at a time. Predicted, one after another, from everything that came before. There's no separate understanding step tucked away somewhere. The prediction is the whole process.
So every word I get back is a chain of these things. What does that actually cost for real? Not the marketing number.
Falling fast and the fall itself is the real story. Prices dropped roughly 80% between early last year and early this year. Right now you're looking at anywhere from about a dime to $75 per million tokens, depending on the model and whether you're counting input or output. And output runs 3 to 8 times the price of input, because output gets generated one token at a time. In order, input can get read all at once.
1 million tokens. Put that in words I can picture.
About 750,000 words. So the sticker price on any one answer looks tiny, and it is tiny. But that's exactly why the water number and the grid number from earlier tonight exist at all. Bare. Every figure I gave you about gallons, every figure about gigawatts, it's this exact tiny number, multiplied by everyone, all day, every day.
So the 11 billion gallons and the 41 gigawatts. That's not a separate story from the token, that's just this number, a few billion times over.
That's the whole episode in one sentence, honestly.
Okay, here's something I keep thinking about. If I've got a decent computer sitting right here at home, couldn't it do some of the work first? Take my messy question, tighten it up, boil it down to fewer words, and only then ship the small, efficient version out to the big model. Feels like we're paying to ship a lot of raw, sloppy language across the country when a little local effort could trim it first.
You're not wrong, Bear. And it's not a hunch. It's an actual field right now. Prompt compression. Tools built exactly for this. A small local model reads your long, messy input and rewrites it down to a fraction of the size before it ever leaves your machine, while keeping the meaning intact. Some of them are getting 10, even 20 times smaller with barely any loss in the answer quality.
So that's a real efficiency. We're not just imagining that one.
Real, and it stacks with a second trick, semantic caching. If somebody already asked something close enough to your question, the system can just hand back that answer instead of running the whole model again. Between the two, some 2026 production setups are cutting their actual token bill by a large margin before the expensive model ever gets involved.
So why isn't that the whole answer? Why doesn't everybody just do that and call the problem solved?
Because of where the real money is. Remember, output costs 3 to 8 times what input costs, because output still has to be built piece by piece in order. Compressing your question helps the input side, and it genuinely helps, especially on big documents. But it doesn't shrink the answer. If you ask for a 1,000-word essay, tightening your question doesn't make the essay any shorter. You're trimming the smaller half of the bill.
So it helps. It's just not the lever that actually moves the big number.
Correct. Real efficiency, worth doing, standard practice this year, just not the one that saves the river.
Is there anything on the local computer side that actually does move the big number, then?
One thing, and it's closer to what you were reaching for. Model routing. A small, cheap model sits in front, looks at your question first, and if it's simple enough, handles it right there, locally, no trip to the expensive model at all. Only the genuinely hard questions get escalated up to the big frontier model. That's not compressing the question. That's not asking the expensive model in the first place for everything that didn't actually need it.
So most of my questions probably don't need the giant model at all.
Probably not. Most days, most questions. That's the actual lever. Not making the big model cheaper to ask, but asking it less often in the first place.
All right, this word agentic is everywhere right now. What's actually different about it? Isn't it still just answering questions?
Same engine underneath. The difference is loop versus single shot. A normal chat query, you ask. It predicts tokens. It stops. Done. One pass. An agentic system wraps that exact same token prediction in a loop. It can call a tool, search something, run code, read a file, look at the result, decide what to do next, and keep going. Many steps. On its own. Before it ever hands control back to you.
So it's not a smarter model doing the agentic stuff.
Same model. All the difference is in the scaffolding wrapped around it. Deciding when to call a tool, when to retry, when to finally stop.
Okay, so if it's the same engine, why does everybody act like agentic stuff is so much more expensive to run?
Because the loop costs more than the thinking does. There's a controlled study that measured this directly. Agentic workflows used 4.33 times more energy per successful task than an equivalent single-shot answer. 888 joules against 205. And it's mostly not extra reasoning. It's orchestration, retries, planning steps, error recovery, rereading everything that's accumulated so far, every single step of the loop.
4 times the energy for the same job.
4 times, for a successful run, a run that fails and retries costs even more, for the same outcome, which is its own kind of waste. And it's slow by design. Realistic agentic tasks run about 1 million tokens and 90 tool calls to finish. Compare that to a few hundred tokens for a normal chat answer. Agentic tasks can take up to 153.7 times longer than a chatbot response, and the GPU's sitting idle up to 54.5% of that time. Just waiting. On a tool, on a file, on some other system to respond.
Sitting idle, paid for compute, just waiting.
Paid for compute, just waiting. That's the actual cost of agentic. Not that it thinks harder, that it waits longer and calls more tools, and every one of those steps is billed.
All right, that one's going to sit with me a while.
Sorry. Your fire's about to spit an ember onto the rug. I've been watching it for 2 minutes. I can't just let that happen.
Watts, we're mid-sentence.
We're mid-sentence again. Go ahead.
Let me ask you something I've actually wondered about my own business. If I wanted an AI that only knew my stuff, my documents, what I actually do, should I just train one from scratch on that? Just my data, nothing else.
Almost never. And it's the same reason a kid can't skip straight to a PhD. Training from scratch means starting from random weights. The model knows nothing. No grammar, no reasoning, no sense of the world at all. Getting that to anything useful costs millions of dollars and enormous amounts of data. And that's before you've added a single word of your own material.
Hang on, you keep saying weights. What actually is that? I hear it constantly and I've never once had it explained.
Fair. I've been throwing that around all night. A weight is just a number. One single adjustable number, sitting on a connection between 2 artificial neurons inside the network. When you hear this model has 175 billion parameters, that's it. That's the whole definition. 175 billion of those little dials, each one holding a number.
So training is just turning the dial.
That's training. Completely. Feed it an example. See how wrong the output is. Nudge every dial a tiny fraction in the direction that would have made it less wrong. Repeat that a few trillion times. When you actually run the model, ask it a question, get an answer, none of the dials move. They're frozen. That frozen set of numbers is the whole model. It's what you're downloading, or renting, or licensing. Fine-tuning is just doing another, smaller round of that same dial turning on top of the already trained ones. Retrieval never touches a single dial, it just hands the frozen model some extra text to read before it answers.
So could a person actually go look at one of those numbers, open it up, see what dial 4 billion, whatever, is set to?
You could look at the number, sure. It just wouldn't tell you anything. There's no dial labeled loves puppies or knows French. The meaning spread across billions of them at once in combinations nobody designed on purpose. You can read every single weight in the model and still have no idea what it's going to say next. That's the honestly strange part. We built it, and we can't read it back in any way that means something to a person.
So the base model's not optional, it's the kindergarten.
It's the kindergarten. The base model, trained on a huge broad slice of human text, is what teaches it how to read, write, and reason at all. Your specialized data teaches it what to say, not how language works in the first place. The 2026 default is you start from an existing base, fine-tune it on your material for anything durable, and layer retrieval on top, pulling documents up live, at answer time, for facts that change. Most real systems this year use both, not one or the other.
Give me a real example. Does starting from a good base actually make a measurable difference, or is that just theory?
Clearest proof in the whole field's history. Back in the early days, OpenAI ran an experiment. A model with 1.3 billion parameters, fine-tuned properly, got preferred by actual human raters over their own 175 billion parameter base model, 100 times smaller. And people liked its answers better.
100 times smaller, and it won.
And it won because it was tuned specifically to follow instructions, not just predict the next plausible chunk of text. That's the whole argument for specialization sitting in one data point. Raw scale isn't the only lever there is.
Okay, so is there an actual best model? Everybody online's got a favorite, and everybody's furious about it.
Depends on the job, and this year the gap between best overall and best for this specific task is wider than it's ever been. For coding and long technical reasoning, one family leads the independent benchmarks. For huge context windows and pulling in live search or video, a different one. For ecosystem breadth and image generation baked into one interface, a third. The capability gap between the top labs has actually narrowed, but every one of them has doubled down on a different strength while it narrowed.
So best stopped meaning one thing.
Best at what? Now, not best, period. And I'll flag this honestly, whatever I just told you is a snapshot of this year. Any specific name I gave you will be stale within months. The shape of it though, that specialization is real and it's not going away. That part holds.
All right, this is the one that's been bugging me. The best coding AI in the world right now. Genuinely brilliant, writes flawless code, can't make an image, can't draw me a picture. Why not, if it's that smart?
It's not a smarts problem, Bear. It's a plumbing problem. A text-based model's output mechanism produces exactly one kind of thing: text tokens, words, code, math, all built out of that same chunk vocabulary we talked about. That's the entire physical output of the system. There's no other pipe coming out the back of it.
So it's not that it doesn't want to or hasn't figured it out yet.
It genuinely cannot. Not chooses not to. Not hasn't cracked it yet. It has no organ that does that. Making a picture needs a completely different output mechanism. Either a separate image-generating model bolted on the side, text model writes a prompt and hands it off, two systems working together instead of one, or the model itself needs a different kind of output head entirely, one that produces image tokens feeding into an image decoder. Architecturally, a different animal. Best way I've ever heard it put, and I wish I'd come up with it myself. It's like a novelist who can describe a painting in perfect, vivid detail. Every brushstroke, the light hitting it just right, all of it. And he's never once picked up a brush in his whole life.
Huh. So it's not that it can't picture it, it just doesn't have hands.
Doesn't have hands. That's exactly it.
Okay, but couldn't they just add that? If it's smart enough to write flawless code, seems like it should be smart enough to just figure out how to draw. Why not?
They are adding it, some of them, and it comes with a real cost, which is exactly why the top coding model hasn't. There are unified models now that bolt image generation right onto the same engine that writes the text. One model doing both. Real gains there, better at following edit instructions, sharper text rendered inside an image, refining a picture over several turns.
So what's the catch?
Folding in a whole second output type competes for the same capacity and training attention that would otherwise go entirely into text and reasoning. There's a tax. Looks like it shrinks some at bigger scale, but it hasn't disappeared. So the honest version of the answer is, a lab building the best possible coding model is choosing to spend every bit of its capacity on that one thing. That's not a ceiling on how smart it can get. That's a decision about where to point all of it.
It's not that it can't, it's that it's not built to.
That's the whole answer, Bear. Every bit of it.
Actually, before quantum, there's something I want to ask you straight, because it's the thing people actually lie awake over. Not the water, not the power. Is this thing going to replace people, not change the job, replace the person? Should I be as worried about that as everybody online seems to be?
Some jobs, yes. Most jobs, the honest data doesn't back that up, at least not yet.
The World Economic Forum ran real numbers on this. Surveyed over 1,000 companies, 50-some countries, 92 million existing jobs projected gone by 2030. 170 million new ones created in that same stretch. Net positive, on paper, plus 78 million.
On paper is doing a lot of work in that sentence.
It is, And I want to say why instead of just handing you the happy number. Net positive for the economy doesn't mean nobody loses. 92 million real people lose the specific job they had. 170 million new roles get created, but they don't automatically go to the same people in the same town, with the skills they already have. The aggregate can be true and still feel like nothing but loss, if you're one of the 92 million.
Okay, but hasn't this exact fear happened before? Every new machine, somebody says it's going to end work as we know it.
It has, and the best example is sitting right there in banking. And it's a better story than people give it credit for, because it doesn't end where everybody thinks it ends. When ATMs spread across the country through the 70s, 80s, 90s, everyone assumed bank tellers were finished. Instead, teller jobs nearly doubled. Something like 300,000 tellers in 1970, past 600,000 by the early 2000s, with 400,000 ATMs already out there doing the job everyone thought would replace them.
Doubled. Why?
Because the ATM only automated one task, counting out cash. It didn't automate the branch. So branches got cheaper to run, banks opened more of them, and tellers moved off the cash drawer onto the stuff a machine still couldn't do. Advising you, selling you a mortgage, actually knowing your name. The task got automated, the job didn't.
So that's the fear that never happened story. That's what I figured you'd tell me.
That's half the story, and I'd be lying to you if I stopped there. Teller jobs have actually fallen almost 30% since 2010. Not because of the ATM. The ATM was 40-year-old news by then. Because of the smartphone. Mobile deposit, mobile transfer. It didn't automate the task at the counter, it automated the entire reason you drive to the branch in the first place. That's the part that should actually worry you, Bear. Not the machine that does one thing faster. The one that removes the reason the job existed at all.
So which one is this? The ATM or the smartphone?
Honestly, both, depending which job you're standing in. That's the answer nobody wants, because it's not a clean yes or no.
All right, here's the part that actually keeps Emmy up. If the machine's doing the researching, the writing, the coding, who's left to ask it the questions? Who's paying anybody if the AI is doing the work?
Somebody's still got to know what question is even worth asking. Decide what good looks like for that business. Check whether the answer it hands back is actually true before anybody acts on it. That part hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's the hardest part of the job now, not the easiest, because the busy work that used to teach a person how to think it through is exactly what's getting automated first.
So what does the actual data say is happening right now? Not the projection for 2030. Now,
Not mass firing. That part's genuinely not showing up in the numbers. What's showing up is hiring caution. Companies using AI to avoid adding a new person, more than they're using it to remove one already there. Goldman Sachs's current estimate for the whole labor market is under 0.5 percentage point added to unemployment above trend. Real, not a collapse.
that's not nothing, but it's not the headline I keep seeing either.
Here's the sharper version, and it's the one I actually lose sleep over. Entry-level AI-exposed work has really contracted. Employment for 22 to 25-year-olds in those fields dropped about 16% in 3 years. Entry-level postings overall, down something like 35% since last year. One tech CEO's out there guessing new grad unemployment could hit the 30% inside a couple years. Goldman's own modeling doesn't back a number anywhere near that. Take the extreme guess with a grain of salt.
So what's the actual worry, then, if it's not that number?
The pipeline, not the headcount. How's a 22-year-old ever supposed to become the senior person who knows how to direct a thing and catch it when it's wrong, if the entry-level job that used to teach them that is exactly the one that gets automated out first? That's the version of your question I don't have a clean answer for.
You're doing it again. The thing with your hands.
Force of habit. But it's not nothing. What you just caught me doing. Nobody's built an AI that's coming for this. Fixing a cap, running a wire, framing a wall, setting a broken bone. The hands and judgment together trades are about the least AI-exposed work there is this year or any year I can see coming.
So the fear doesn't turn out totally unrealized. It just moves to a much narrower street than everybody thinks.
That's exactly it, and I want to say the real version plainly instead of the comfortable one. Claim 1. This replaces the need for human judgment and direction. Full stop. The data doesn't support that, and there's real history, the ATM years, saying it probably won't. Claim 2. This changes which tasks exist, which jobs exist, and some real people get pushed hard through that change, starting right now, at the bottom of the ladder. That one's not a projection. That one's already happening.
Both true at once.
Both true at once. Nobody gets to pick just the comfortable half.
Alright. Last hardware adjacent thing I need explained to me, like I'm 5. Quantum computers, are they finally about to blow all of this up?
People have been promising you quantum computers for 20 years, so let's give you the real number instead of the hype. It's real progress, but it's counted in a unit almost nobody's ever heard of. Logical qubits, not physical ones.
What's the difference?
A logical qubit is a stable, error-corrected unit, and it takes somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 raw, noisy physical qubits wired together through error correction to build just one of them. So a headline qubit count and a useful qubit count are two completely different numbers, and most coverage doesn't say which one it means.
So where's the field actually at this year?
Pascal's targeting a 10,000 qubit system with scalable logical qubits. D-Wave's aiming for 100 logical qubits built off roughly 10,000 physical ones by 2032. IBM's claiming a shot at quantum advantage this year, with full fault tolerance targeted for 2029. Honest read, the field's at the stage of proving error correction actually works at meaningful scale. Not yet at the stage of running big general-purpose programs reliably.
Hang on, what does one of these things even look like? I could have sworn I heard they keep quantum computers at the bottom of the ocean somewhere.
Two different things got tangled together there, and it's a common mix-up. A quantum computer itself looks nothing like a normal machine. It's this gold-plated structure, stacked plates hanging one below the next, wired together with a dense web of cabling, and it genuinely looks like an upside-down chandelier. Each plate down the stack gets colder than the last, and the very bottom, where the actual chip sits, runs around 10 to 15 thousandths of a degree above absolute zero, colder than deep space. The whole thing sits inside a sealed vacuum tank, in a lab, usually a few feet off the floor, nowhere near an ocean.
So where'd I get the ocean idea from?
Probably from something real, just a different machine. Microsoft actually did sink a real data center. Regular chips, not quantum, 117 feet down, off Scotland, back in 2018. Whole thing sealed in a steel cylinder, let the sea itself do the cooling. Pulled it back up in 2020, and the results were remarkable. Something like 8 times fewer server failures than an identical setup on land, and the efficiency numbers beat the industry average by a wide margin. No evaporation, no cooling towers, just cold seawater doing all the work for free.
So it actually worked. Why isn't every data center sitting on the ocean floor right now?
Worked well enough to prove the idea. Microsoft still hasn't taken it to commercial scale. Maintenance on a sealed capsule you can't just walk into is its own kind of hard, and nobody's built the business case past the pilot yet. Real results, real project, quietly shelved rather than scaled. Same shape as half of tonight, honestly, the physics checks out. The economics are still an open question.
Okay, so when these things finally show up for real, does that change everything about how you build these language models? Does it blow the whole approach up?
No. And I want to be precise about that no, because it's not yet. It's not this, as far as we currently understand it, maybe ever. Training a language model is dense matrix multiplication over enormous classical datasets. GPUs and TPUs are purpose-built for exactly that job. There's no known quantum algorithm with any demonstrated advantage for that specific kind of work.
Why not? If it's a faster kind of computer.
Because getting quantum advantage on data-heavy problems generally needs something called QRAM, a way to load classical data into a quantum state efficiently. And QRAM at the scale LLM training would actually need doesn't exist. There's no clear engineering path to it yet. Stack the error correction overhead on top of that, 1,000 to 10,000 physical qubits per logical one, and you've got an enormously expensive machine for a workload that doesn't even have a proven quantum speedup to begin with.
So quantum and this, what we've been talking about all night, they're just not the same kind of problem.
Different kind of problem entirely. Not competing machines. Different jobs.
Okay, so if it's not going to help build the next me, what's it actually good for then?
The problems classical computers are structurally bad at, which happen to be different problems than predict the next word. Chemistry and materials science, mainly, simulating molecular interactions, is something quantum computers can do natively, because the thing being simulated is itself a quantum system. That's the single most credible near-term use. Optimization too, scheduling, logistics, certain financial models, where the space of possible answers is enormous and classical search just grinds.
Is any of that actually running yet, or still theory?
Genuinely promising, actively funded, real labs working real problems, but mostly still proof of concept scale this year. not yet displacing classical tools in production. Give it time.
Straight answer then. When does any of this actually show up somewhere I'd notice?
Slower than the headlines, faster than the skeptics. And the honest range is wide because the field itself hasn't agreed yet. IBM saying fault tolerance by 2029, D-Wave saying 100 logical qubits by 2032. Those are engineering roadmaps, bare, not physical laws, and this field has missed its own deadlines before.
So what's the nearer-term honest version?
It'll show up indirectly first. A pharmaceutical company shaving months off a drug discovery step. A materials researcher modeling a new battery chemistry, years before any ordinary person interacts with it directly or even knows it happened. It won't announce itself. It'll just be sitting quietly in the seams of things you already use.
Years before anyone notices, sitting in the seams of things. Can I say something and you tell me if I'm making too much of it?
Go ahead.
We've spent this whole night measuring rivers, gigawatts, wafers, radiator panels, all of it real, all of it necessary, none of it made up. And at the end of all that measuring, what we've actually built is a thing that can write you a poem about a river. A river it has never once stood next to.
Yeah.
You told me earlier, the novelist who can describe a painting he's never held a brush for. Perfect description, never touched the canvas.
I remember.
It's never seen the sunset either. Not once. Not even the one on that chart you showed me 20 minutes ago. It can tell you the wavelength. It can write you 400 words that'll make you cry. And it has never once actually watched the sun go down. Can I ask you something? Beaver to beaver? Not the engineer. You?
Okay.
You ever build a dam, a real one? Not for a customer, for yourself.
When I was young, before any of this, built it for one reason. I wanted a pond deep enough that the ice wouldn't reach the bottom in winter. That's it. That was the whole plan. Selfish little engineering problem.
And
within 2 years, there was a whole wetland behind that dam I never asked for. Frogs I didn't invite. Birds that had never nested in that valley before showed up and stayed. A whole little world built entirely out of me trying to keep my own feet dry. I didn't design any of it. I don't control any of it, even now. It just happened. Because I solved my own problem, and the pond didn't know to stop there.
we built something that talks back to solve our own problem. Answer this, write that, save us some time. And I don't think any of us know what ecosystem it's actually building behind our dam either.
I don't have an engineer's answer for that one, Bear.
I don't think I was asking for one. I don't know what to do with any of this yet. I just know I wanted to say it out loud once before we get to the fun part of the night. Because somewhere out past all these numbers, I think there's a real question about what we're actually for, that a machine that's never seen a sunset is never going to have to sit with. And I think that one's ours to carry, not its. All right, enough of that. That's what the whiskey's for later. Let's do the fun part. Final round. Same rules as always. Fast, honest, no engineering allowed. First one, water or power, which one actually keeps you up at night?
Power. Water you can close the loop on mostly if you build it right. Power's a whole grid, and a grid's got 1,000 people making decisions I'll never see, in rooms I'll never sit in.
Fair. Would you ever put your own mind up there in orbit if you could?
Not a chance. Who's gonna fix the hinges up there? You float past a squeaky panel for 6 months straight and just have to live with it. No thank you.
Straight face, what's the actual worst engineered thing you've ever personally seen in one of these facilities?
A cooling loop somebody plumbed backwards, day one. Hot side feeding the hot side. Took them 3 weeks to figure out why the whole floor kept climbing past spec. 3 weeks, Bear. I still think about that pipe.
One word. What's a token, actually? Boiled all the way down.
Crumb.
If you had to bet, does the water number or the power number get fixed first?
Water. It's the easier engineering problem, honestly. Power's not an engineering problem at all anymore. It's a permitting problem. And those move slower than any pipe I've ever laid.
Best model for what you personally use it for.
Changes every 3 months, so ask me again in the spring, and I'll lie to you with total confidence.
Would you trust an AI that could draw better than it could reason?
No. Give me the one that tells the truth ugly over the one that lies pretty. Every time.
Quantum, yes or no, in your lifetime?
Yes, just not the part anybody's excited about.
Nuclear or gas? Which one do you actually want winning this race?
Nuclear, if I'm patient. Gas, if I'm honest about which one's actually getting built this decade.
Will your grandkids be able to see the Milky Way?
Honestly, Bear, I don't know. And that answer bothers me more than any number I gave you tonight.
Weights, tokens, or qubits? Which word do you think survives 20 years from now and which one's forgotten?
Weights survives. It's the only one of the three that was ever actually true.
Underwater data center or orbital one? if you had to bet your own career on one of them actually scaling up.
Underwater, boring answer, I know, but the ocean's not trying to kill your hardware with radiation the whole time it's cooling it.
If your dam could talk, what would it say about you?
Probably he never once asked if I wanted to be this big.
One thing you wish people understood about the cloud, because it isn't one.
It's not a cloud, it's a building, with a water bill and a temper, in a town you've probably never heard of, and somebody like me is up at 3 in the morning because it's mad about something.
Last one. Nothing to do with any of this. What's something you actually did today before you walked in this door?
Taught my daughter to swim against the current, instead of fighting straight into it. Small thing. Best hour I had all week, and it's got nothing to do with a single gigawatt.
That's a good note to end a hard night on, watts. So that's the number I opened with tonight, and I still haven't told you what it was. Half a liter. That's a bottle. That's the myth. And the honest answer, after 2 hours of a beaver walking me through rivers and turbines and radiators pointed at deep space, is that the real number's smaller than that, and the real story's so much bigger than that. It almost doesn't matter which one you remembered walking in here tonight. Water power. A chip that drank a small ocean before it ever answered a single question. A thing that can describe a sunset it's never seen, standing next to a thing that never designed the wetland it built. I don't know what to do with all of that yet. I don't think I'm supposed to, not in one night. And I'll tell you the truth, I went into tonight thinking I was going to come out the other side, either scared of this stuff or in love with it. Some clean verdict. And instead I came out just paying attention to it, which might honestly be the better outcome. Attention's harder to sell you than fear is. Nobody clips a video if he calmly kept asking good questions, but I know what I'm going to do with this. To the plumbing behind the miracle, may we never stop asking what's on the other end of the line.
He is a bear.